here. So make sure we get this recorded. What's that? Hope everybody's day is going well. I know it's been a busy one where, you know how it is, doing panels and talking to brokers and talking to property management companies and trying to do business while doing business. You guys know how that goes. It can be a little hectic. There we go, Jason. We got you on a single feed there, so I think we should be good. Let me get our Facebook started, and then we're still missing one panelist. So while I get Facebook started here, let's start by introducing our panelists. And we're going to start with you, Devin. Let you just kind of tell us about yourself, where you're at, where you came from, and what you're doing nowadays in multifamily.
Hey, guys. This is Devin Elder. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. Lived here most of my life. I've been an investor since 2012. Started out in single family. We flipped, 200 houses at this point and still have a very active single family business, but then got into multifamily a few years ago, starting with a little 6 unit I ran myself, and then a 75 unit, and then a 130 unit. And it's just kind of grown and grown from there. We've been picking up a lot of properties these last few years. So after a closing this month, we'll be at a little over 1,000 units of multifamily in San Antonio or Central Texas. And it's great. Love the business model. I've done a lot of different real estate investing models. Multifamily is probably my favorite for a lot of reasons, and super excited to be here and talk about it.
All right. Thank you very much. Hunter, I'll let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm the managing principal of Cashflow Connections, which is a private equity company that invests in commercial real estate. So essentially, we partner joint venture with operating partners or sponsors, and we pool investors together and we handle investor communications for them. We have about 270 active investors, purchased about $45 million worth of assets in 2018, and continue to look to scale, really focusing on deal flow right now. And I'm sure that's going to be an interesting topic for a lot of the other panels that you guys are talking about. It's a fascinating time to be involved in real estate. We really transitioned to focus on some of the more like the tertiary asset classes, mobile home parks and self-storage, but I'm a huge proponent of just diversification overall. So as a passive investor, that's allowed me to have a lot of exposure, multifamily, retail office, et cetera. But generally speaking, we're looking for great partners, and that's really how we build our business around those operating partners.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And Whitney, we'll let you go next. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Anyway, started small multifamily for many years, got up to 15 unit. Then this word syndication hit me and tried to figure out what that was, and been studying that. And now focused on raising capital, and now we partnered on over 400 units and raising capital from investors. And our whole goal is to help fund children's adoptions through real estate. And so everybody gets to participate in that while making good returns, but just pleased to be here and share with you about thought leadership platforms and how that's helped me in my business.
All right. Thank you for sharing. And real quick, Jason, before you jump in, we had one other panelist, John Monteiro, was supposed to join us. He's had a family emergency. He just emailed me and said he has thought he'd be done by now, but is not. So hope everything's good there, John. No worries on that. Sorry you couldn't join us, but like I said, hope everything goes well with your situation there. But Jason, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me. Yes. So Jason Yarusi, I'm in New Jersey. Happen to found myself in Maui today for my wife's father's 60th birthday, who actually lives here. So horrible setting to be in, but really happy to be here. Family construction business, 5 generations, heavy construction, focused on house lifting, moving buildings. That's what we did for many years. Wanted to find an avenue where we could find a more passive approach to our lifestyle, just with everything really being a rigorous approach. Jumped into multifamily a couple of years ago. It's been about 4 years since. We're since controlling 200 units of ourselves and have been partnered on another 250 plus, really focusing on building that out while we still handle our heavy construction business day to day here. We host the Real Estate Investing Foundation podcast, which focuses on a lot of multifamily investors and others, and really happy to be here. Let's do this.
Awesome. Well, our topic today for our panel is about authority platforms. And really quick, now that we have everybody's background, if you could, in a sentence or two, describe what a authority platform means for you. And we're going to go in that same order and starting with you, Devin.
I think Frank Kern uses the word indoctrination. That has a very negative connotation to it. But, my opinion is you can't not use these platforms. We have HD production studios in our pockets with our phones. We have free platforms like LinkedIn, YouTube, podcasting, et cetera. And so it's just a chance for somebody to get to know you in a very scalable, nonlinear way. And, I think there's some downsides to social media, addiction and so forth. But from a business perspective, it's a fantastic way. We're in an unprecedented time of being able to connect with like-minded folks, whether that's, partners, investors. And it's just, I think if you step back and look at, the last 15 years and this incredible opportunity we have right now to connect with people, I say you can't not do it because the cost is so low and the benefits are potentially so high.
Okay, excellent. And Hunter, and in a few sentences, can you tell us what an authority platform means to you?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep this as brief as possible for people that know me. Saying anything in a sentence or two is almost impossible for me. That's why I have a podcast, because no one can tell me to be quiet. But I'll as short as possible. I had some success investing in mobile home parks and self-storage and multifamily starting in like 2012. And I got a track record and wanted to come to my friends and family and say, look, this is what we've done. This is incredible. These returns are completely categorically different than what you have in the stock market. I threw a luncheon, 30 people came, and we raised a total of $0. And the reason that happened is because I was trying to convert people, basically have a pseudo-religious experience, teaching them that this is a new investment opportunity that they'd never heard of and were really skeptical of. And so for me, what an authority platform is, rather than going around chasing people around, trying to make them unlearn all this propaganda that they've learned about stock market and all those types of real estate investments or non-real estate investments, you create an infrastructure that attracts people that are already in your culture, basically. And so you're able to, and rather than hunting people, you're able to be the bear at the end of the river. And I think that being in the bear is the position that we all want to be in. The salmon jump into his mouth as opposed to otherwise. Not that my investors are salmon that I'm eating, but just to clarify, that's the position that I'm trying to be in as an entrepreneur.
Sure. Yeah, we definitely understood the metaphor there. But yeah, so that's a great way to put it too. Whitney, what does authority platform mean to you?
The authority platform just really helps position yourself as an expert in the industry. But not only that, it just helps put out, what you're doing. It helps let lots of people know what you're doing. It's a networking a platform on steroids. It's been amazing for that. But also, when you can provide all this content, you are providing value to so many people, and I've had so many people reach back out and provide value to me in many ways, because I can provide that value to them through the podcast in some way, or for the guests. It's just really helped, push my business forward, but just because of the platform.
I believe you're muted.
There we go. Sorry, I was trying to type to the chat box and get questions done there and forgot to turn off mute. But Jason, if you could kind of define for us, like, why we call it authority platform. What does that mean? What does the authority platform mean? And how does it benefit us that way?
Sure. So, Whitney said it a great way here is that we're providing value for others. And many times you sit on the sideline thinking, well, I don't really have value that I can provide. So I'm going to wait. And if you look back at maybe YouTube, when YouTube first started out, people that just first got on there and just started filming things now have hundreds or millions of subscribers today. And they, in fact, not necessarily are the best at what they do, but they got out there and just were the early implementer to do this. So for creating a podcast or doing a meetup, just getting out there and providing value, and it doesn't have to be yourself, but bringing on other like-minded people that can help others along the way allows you to create a platform, and really just that authority platform that shows that you are leading the cause. And that's what really the authority platform means to me.
Yeah, and I think that was really the kind of the concept I want to get across to our attendees is the authority platform is not saying that we are the authority, but we are involved in the industry and we are providing content, which in a sense does make us an authority in the area. We're not the authority, but we can provide you content in that. And in doing so, does that create credibility with our listeners? And who specifically are we trying to build credibility with through our authority platform? I think that's different depending on the space that you're in. But let's go back through. And Devin, why don't you go ahead and take that? Who are you trying to build credibility with through your authority platform?
So I basically created an avatar of an investor, and it's a 55-year-old dentist that is a first-time real estate investor. So that avatar really helps me. And several of my friends, also investors, fit that avatar. So that was just simplest for me to say, who am I talking to? So I try to filter every piece of content through that as if I was sitting down to lunch, because my whole I don't have a podcast. I do a lot of short video content and put it out on a bunch of platforms. The whole genesis for that for me was having a lot of lunches and explaining a lot of these things repeatedly. So I understand that everybody's got the same questions. Let's catalog a massive FAQ so that if, of course, I'm willing to have lunch and talk to anybody, but if they can consume 5 or 10 or 20 of my videos before we have that conversation, they're going to know me better and so forth. So having that avatar has really helped me understand, it's just replicating that first time lunch. Hey, I'm in real estate. This is what we do. Here's how we structure the deals. Here's how we raise the capital. Here's how we execute. And just explaining all of it over a series of videos so that it's an FAQ and you can get all those questions out. So it's taking, I basically have one kind of customer or a focus, and I'll deviate from that, but that's helped me to just not try to be all things to all people, but really have a one-on-one conversation via video with basically a high net worth person that's a first-time investor. What are they interested? What do they want to learn about? How can I answer that question and be of service in a way that's infinitely scalable?
Great answer. Great answer. Hunter, let's have you add to that. What's your target audience and what's your target, who are you trying to gain credibility with through your authority platform?
Yeah, I think to put it as simply as possible, right? Functionally, what a lot of us do is we get people to wire us tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars over the internet for relationships we've curated over the internet. So in order to facilitate that, you have to build some kind of structure and that's scalable that allows people to establish that type of trust with you. And, and I'm sure that everyone on this panel has had that experience where they've basically received a wire from someone that they didn't really have a lot of one-on-one conversations with. Not the type of conversations that you would normally think were required, especially something like 10 years ago. So, for us, an average investor, we work with accredited investors, typically in minimum investments of 50,000 or so. And these are really smart people that may have not gone down the route of focusing on investing, but they're successful in their respective traits. And so they understand what that means. But part of being successful is deferring to other people's expertise. And so what we really want to do is put ourselves in a position that confirms that we're trustworthy, that we're visible, that we're transparent, and that we know what we're talking about. And so I have a podcast, for example, and one of the ways that we've been able to do this is it's clear from the conversations that I've had that I've built up a really significant network of some industry leaders. And so we want people that are compelled by that. And also, the key takeaway is, when people tune into a show that you're doing and you're talking about really important data points, or even if you have guests on, because you're the one providing the content and you have an idea of what the guests are going to talk about, it puts you look really good in the sense that a lot of the data points that they're talking about, even if they're attorneys, CPAs, economists, et cetera. So the listener base, intuitively believes that you're the reason that they're getting smarter and smarter by every episode. But I think all of us will agree, anytime you're partnering with the guests, if I later found out that I had never uploaded one of my episodes, it's still a net positive for me because it's a great learning experience for all of us.
That's a great outlook on that. Whitney, give us your take.
My listeners are mostly going to be people who are looking to get in the syndication business. But what I found is that a lot of listeners will listen because I'm interviewing so many experts, including everybody that's on this panel, that have had lots of success in this business. And so passive investors or people will listen to those interviews to find, that sponsor that they want to listen to. But my niche or my focus has been, the people that are trying to get into this business one way or another, whether they're passive investors or whether they're looking to syndicate their first deal. And those people are the ones that are benefiting from the show, and those are the ones I'm trying to provide content to.
All right, and Jason.
So a lot of great things said here, right? And I wish when I was started, I was a lot more segmented in where our audience approach wanted to be, but it probably would have inhibited me from getting started. So if you're listening to this, ideally, you just need to get out there and take the action step. When we first started, say, our meetup, we knew it was going to be focused on multifamily, but we didn't ultimately have the end thought in mind that, oh, maybe this will bring capital in, or maybe this will bring lead generation. What we did do was we wanted to create a give back, and that's the same thing with the podcast. Create a give back because we've had so many other people that have been so generous with us, just with their time and their information, just to give backs to help us along the way with our path. So how can we do this to create a give back for others? And it's not necessarily that we know everything, but we're able to bring other like-minded people in that can help along the way, help others improve. And throughout that, it's created this wave of just a number of different things, between having investors come in and say that they want to, of course, invest in future deals, to lead generation, where I had a gentleman reach out today that's been coming to our meetup for 13 months and has a deal under contract and is looking for guidance. So there's a lot of different angles that creating this authority platform and can now set up the audience for you instead of you having to think of what the audience has to be in the beginning.
Okay, great. And yeah, really, I love the diversification of speakers on your platform. We were talking yesterday with someone who was in our office about, listening to different podcasts or different videos who had maybe not people specifically in multifamily, but different businesses, and you can gain knowledge even from the way they looked at their business model. Even though it wasn't multifamily, there's still a strategy there. There's still some wisdom there that you can draw from that. And I like the consensus of providing content, not necessarily what you're trying to get out of it, but what you're trying to provide. But at the same time, when we use the word authority platform, if someone's always out there and putting out content, and so when you go to ask, well, who's the biggest authority in that platform? The person with the most content out there, the most validity, or providing the most content to people, and is going to be named, I think, as a top authority in that. Devin, would you agree with that assumption?
Yeah, I would. I think, of course, quality's got to be good. You got to be providing value, but quantity is such an important part. Not sure how Whitney does a daily podcast. I think you have awesome back office team. I certainly don't put out that much content, but yeah, I definitely agree. One thing that I got from a book called Oversubscribed, which I highly recommend that everybody read if you haven't, is this concept that you want to be famous to a few hundred people. So the approach I've taken is not to be, I don't even have a podcast, so I'm not trying to be the top of iTunes charts or anything like that, but I want my core group of investors, a couple hundred people, to one of our goals for my company is to be a highly referable company. So I want almost 100% referral business where, an investor that I've done well by goes, you know what, my buddy's kind of interested in this stuff. I turned him on your website. He consumed a lot of your content, and now he's ready to meet or wire 100K into your next project. And that, to me, this beautiful business model. It grows through referrals, and it's the platform for me anyway. I'm not trying to be kind of number one worldwide, but to make it that much easier for somebody that's new to the business or new to passive investing to go, okay, my buddy likes and trusts this guy, and now I really feel like I've gotten to know him through his platform, see how he talks, and here's a video. He's at one of his deals talking about it. It just creates that credibility that's extremely scalable. So I do definitely agree that, quantity of content is important over time. I think if you stopped your platform, people go, hey, is everything okay with the company? What's going on? So continuity and a lot of content's important, and you just don't know where those hooks are going to land either. I mean, you've got SEO, you've got, YouTube rankings, and you just want to have as many hooks out there in the water as possible to get back to Hunter's fish analogy there.
Yeah, and Hunter, we'll move to you next. What would you like to add to that as far as, quality versus quantity, and also how it relates to people getting started in the business and just being able to just kind of refer people over there, and instead of, like Devin, you were saying, having that first lunch where you're having to explain everything, and they may not necessarily go to your video, but they may go to Hunter or Whitney or Jason's, podcasts, and so how would you like to add to what Devin said?
Yeah, so this quantity versus quality thing is something that we're seeing play out right now. I mean, this is an incredible time to be involved with the authority platforms when it comes to investing, because people have found it's incredibly lucrative, especially on a risk-adjusted basis. You're looking at about $200 of equipment. That $200 of equipment has been responsible for a categorical shift in our business and our marketing strategy overall. And people are starting to understand that. And so because of that, in my opinion, going forward, I think quality is going to be really, really important. And so there's two things that are going on. Number one, whoever puts out the most quantity right now is going to get a lot of download numbers. And it's not really sure, the industry's in flux in terms of whether or not that should be the focus. I think that different strategies have different suggestions and different strengths. For me, because we're trying to gain credibility for actual investment purposes, I think that putting out really dense, long form conversations is really aligned with my business strategy, and also with what I think is advantageous for like investors. So for example, I do a lot of research on each of our guests. We only have one podcast every single week. Anybody that listens to it can tell that I have spent several hours on each topic, being knowledgeable enough to really get as much out of that particular guest.
All right. And Whitney, how would you say your target audience affects whether you're focused on, and maybe, oh, sorry. Are you still there? Because something happened with the video. Maybe you froze. Can you hear me? I think you're frozen.
Who are you talking to, Whitney or Hunter?
Hunter's frozen, I think. Hunter, can you hear me? Okay, Hunter, I'm just going to mute you real quick until I see your video come back in line there, if I can. Whitney, while we're waiting on Hunter's video to come back, how does your target audience affect whether you're focused on quantity, and maybe quality is not the right word, but more aggressive content or more dense content maybe is a better way to form that?
The quantity is definitely something you have to take into consideration when starting a podcast or any thought leadership platform, right? I mean, obviously doing a daily show is a lot of work, and I've had to build a great team, behind the scenes to help me get it all done. I mean, no doubt about it. I can't do a daily show, that many interviews a month by myself. But it's done. I would say it's done a lot for my business personally, but also the listeners, because I can interview so many experts in a very short amount of time. And but I speaking to a point that Devin made earlier. He was talking about the referrals and how some of that happens. And obviously the more shows you do, the more people that are going to know you, the more people that are going to see you, the more content you're going to provide. And my goal is to always make it as quality as possible. Of course, as much as I possibly can. But as far as the, like referrals, I'm speaking at another event. I'm in Tampa right now. And just this morning, 2 different people came up to me and asked me about 2 different panelists that I'm on this panel with. And I've had them on the show, and I've got to know them somewhat personally. And I could speak very highly of them, and without my platform, I wouldn't have known these other panelists, and I wouldn't have been able to even to give them that referral or this other person, they're asking, I wouldn't have known them to be able to speak highly of them. So, it just works in many different ways, not just the obvious ones, but not only did it allow me to meet lots of experts, but it allows me to even provide more value to them that they don't even know about.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And Jason, we'll get you just 1 second. Hunter, we got you back. It's still showing you with oh, there we go. It just evened out on me. So I think something happened with your feed there. So great to have you back. I'm going to switch back to Jason now. Jason, just kind of comment for us, if you will, on your feelings on content versus density, or quantity of putting stuff out there, and how that affects who your target, or how that is affected by target market.
I think the one word that is very important here is consistency. And that goes throughout the way that you produce your content, also how you produce really your business. And so if you're going to tell people that you're going to do a daily podcast, you're going to do it 3 times a week, and it's going to come out, every Wednesday at 6 a.m. Well, that podcast, especially as you're creating your early subscribers and your early following, needs to be consistent, because people in our generation and just throughout the world love that warm, fuzzy blanket. They love to have that consistent content within their routine. And when you start breaking that consistency, you can see very quickly, if you say your podcast is going to be out Wednesday at 6 a.m. and then for whatever reason you don't launch it until Thursday, you'll see a downtick in maybe your listeners and your followers. So it's very important that if your business model is to create content that's going to be released at a certain time and a certain point, quality, of course, is very important, but it also has to be consistent so people can trust you. And that goes through your business as well. If you have investors that come into your deals and you tell them you're going to have a monthly follow-up and then quarterly you're going to be releasing financials, well, that's the expectation. So you need to be consistent in how you're doing that as well throughout your business. So consistency for me is very important, and it just creates the track record about who you are as a person, and then also helps you set the stage for how your business is going to operate so people can get used to you.
Yeah, and I think the quality of content is going to play out as you move into, as you scale and as you grow into long term. Because if your content isn't dense or isn't rich or isn't educational, and it's very light, I mean, those are a dime a dozen, right? That very light level content about real estate investing, you're only going to be reaching those entry level, maybe people that are new, and that's great, and you're providing content for them. But if you want to scale and you want to grow, and you're going to grow alongside your investor base or your syndication base, you're going to have to continue to provide quality content in order for you to be able to scale. Let's touch base on.
Can I add something, Brandon?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking about that, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about how to get started with Thought Leadership Platform later or something. But I wanted to say, your first episodes of whatever you're doing are going to be your worst. And you want it to be as good a content as possible, but you eventually just got to get started, and then it gets better and it gets better, and you learn, and people provide support, but your content maybe initially may not be just fantastic, but you're gonna improve it, and it's gonna get better and better as you go.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday in one of our panels. How version 1 is better than version none. And how sometimes you just need to stop overthinking it. But to speak of the consistency thing, I think that's very important. When you decide to do a frequency, and Whitney, hats off to you, and Dan in the next room as well for doing daily podcasts, because that's a big commitment, and it takes a lot of effort. And hey, I love that. But since we're touching on specific platform usages, everybody's doing something different frequency. So let's go down through and let's talk to each one of our panelists about what is their specific platform and how frequently they put content out. So Devin, we're going to start with you.
Great, thanks. So my content strategy for our company is really simple. It's 2 videos a week, Tuesday and Thursday, to push them out. So I might record, 8 pieces of content in one shot and just upload it for my assistant to do the rest. But we push the raw video platform to LinkedIn. Raw video files do much better on social media platforms than links. Social media platforms do not like links because you are taking eyeballs off their platform and you're sending it somewhere else. So you want to spend the time to put the raw file on the platform. LinkedIn was really kind of an afterthought for me. I was just in the process of rebranding it from my corporate days, and I saw that my videos were getting a lot of views. So we just upload there, but we go to LinkedIn, YouTube, Bigger Pockets. We put it on the company blog, and then we transcribe the video for a company blog post so we get some SEO out of it. And all that happens I set up the training for my assistant for it, but I don't do any of it. I just think of one topic, talk about it for 5 minutes, title it, and upload the video. And so, my time involvement is about a minute longer than actually recording it. And I'm just talking off the top of my head. I really like Whitney's point about not making it perfect. We're not worried about being perfect. There's a concept from that I got from Dan Sullivan, a strategic coach, tremendous entrepreneur. This concept that and it applies to content and other things, that you get something 80% done and then you ship it, because the time and energy you're going to spend on that last 20% trying to tweak and get it perfect is going to drive you crazy. And your real improvement, to Whitney's point, is going to come over time. And so you just have to start shipping it and then getting feedback from the market and fine tuning it. That's where you're going to get your other 20%. So we use, I do video because it's the simplest way. I'm not going to write a long article, like some of my friends do. That's great. But my platform of choice is to get in and out as quick as possible and be able to create a month of content. That's 8 posts in under an hour. So an hour a month, time spent. And with that kind of ROI, you can't not do it.
Excellent. And we're going to get to that. Will be one of our next questions is what's the return that you're seeing on that? But Hunter, what is your specific platform and what's your frequency preference?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just got to say that I just lit up because Devin mentioned strategic coach, and I actually just signed up for that program for the first time after months and months of due diligence and consideration. So happy to hear that he's a fan of his, Dan Sullivan's. So, we have a couple different things that we do. The podcast is kind of the leading lead gen, but also lead nurture system. I also have written a lot of articles on the topic. By the way, something that I have found, at least personally, I don't really do well if I have to shift gears cognitively. So if you're thinking about creating some kind of platform, exactly what Devin just mentioned, I like to do a lot of content in big time blocks. For me, I can usually do up to 3 hours of work before things start to fall apart and the efficiency goes down. So like, for an example, if you're going to write 10 articles, what I do is I'll write 100 topics of potential articles. And yes, a lot of them are going to be not so good, but the fact that they're not going to be so good, it takes that.
I think we lost the video.
That are really worth. Oh no.
No, you're back now. You just froze for a second. You're back.
Okay. So basically I write that 100 topics down, and then when I know that a lot of them are going to be not so good. And so because of that, it makes me realize that I can just kind of power through. So when I have 100 topics, then I riddle that down to about 10 different article topics. And that makes it really easy to rate the best 10 articles. But then I go back later and I may rate 52 emails based on the 100 topics. Now you get 10 articles, 52 emails, and I may even do a video or a podcast about some of those topics as well. So now you're just generating all this content. But the key there is that I'm not trying to come up with a topic every single day. That for me will require too much cognitively shifting of gears, because I'm writing a topic, taking a phone call, doing an email, and that's just inefficient. So we do all those, and then we also have an annual conference. And so really the whole thing is, when I talk about that nurture system, I want to touch leads and investors in multiple different ways, weekly with the newsletter, weekly with the podcast, quarterly with the quarterly report, and then annually with the conference. And I think, you're starting to you're firing on all cylinders. So that's kind of the way that we handle it.
Okay, excellent. And I think that's going to tie in with Whitney pretty well, because Whitney does a daily podcast, but you're not recording every day, right? So kind of explain what your process is, and that is correct on your frequency, correct? Daily?
That's correct. It is a daily show, and that's 7 days a week. A lot of people look at me like I'm crazy, or they say Monday through Friday, right? And I said, no, it's 7 days a week. And but there's some secrets to making that happen. But yes, you have to batch those shows. You have to be able to record 8 or 10 shows in a day, and there's some afternoons where I'll record 4 or 5 shows in the afternoon, or numerous days a month, and to get the recordings and the shows in. But the real estate syndication show, it's every day, and there's a different guest pretty much every day. And but I really like the way Hunter lays out the way he creates content. He and I had talked about that before, and using it for many different ways. And but batching shows for me is, it's key. It's critical. People say, well, how are you doing a show today? Or how are you doing a show? Well, it's because I did 10 on Monday, or I did, and I'll try to stay really far ahead. I'll stay 2 months ahead if I can, with recordings.
Okay, excellent. And Jason, tell us about your platform, how often you do it, and the frequency of it.
Sure. So we have a podcast that we do a long form interview that basically launches on Wednesday, and then Monday and Friday are two other short form podcasts. The Monday is designated for multifamily topics, and Friday is about your core business and efficiencies within your business. We tried to record and get as far out as possible. So for the long form interviews, we'll basically do 2 to 3 on 2 days a week. So we're usually about 2 to 2.5 months ahead. And then for the short form can happen more week to week because they're generally 2 or 3 month topics. And then our multifamily meetup happens once every month, every second Tuesday. Generally for that, it's just a topic for meetup. Did I lose you there? Oh, no. Okay.
No, you got me. I was just jumping
Gotcha.
out. I sit behind this desk for hours and hours on these 3 days. So sometimes I'll flip the video off to get a drink of water or something like that. But I'm still keeping track of you guys. So that's excellent because everybody has a different perspective and a little bit different nuance on everything they're doing, whether it's video or daily or, weekly. It's you all have a different platform, but it's all beneficial. So the next question that I have is I think we kind of touched on this, but I think this is a little more specific. So what was your goal in creating the Authority platform, and is your current strategy accomplishing that goal? Devin, let's start with you.
Yeah, my goal with the content platform was to create a massive FAQ library to address any question any investor would ever have. So I have not achieved that goal, of course, but it has absolutely helped in that, I've had these conversations, and I know everybody on this panel can relate that, you're building those relationships while you're doing other things. I'm touring a property, but I'm building a relationship with somebody, I guarantee it, and they're getting to know me. And so when we do have that conversation, obviously every investor I have a pre-existing substantive relationship with, as I'm sure you do with all your investors. But a lot of it starts with that content so that when you do have the conversation, it's just pre-paving the road. I mean, you might drive the last quarter mile instead of driving 100 miles with somebody because they're just comfortable with you. So my platform was to create an FAQ on my website where people could just poke around the website and click the videos tab and go, whoa, this guy's got 150 videos on like every question or topic I would have, and they're all 3-5 minutes long. They're easily digestible. And so that's been my goal from day one, is to have an FAQ library, and it's definitely accomplished that.
Excellent. Whitney, what was your goal in creating your Authority platform, and your current strategy in that? Have you had to shift that, or do you find that your starting strategy has accomplished your goal or is accomplishing?
It's definitely accomplishing my goal in big ways. It's been amazing to watch it work, really, but even to meet the guys on this panel, I've interviewed over 130 people now, and it's 130 people that are experts in this business that I would not know right now if I had not started the podcast. So even if it never brings in one penny from sponsorships or anything like that, if I stopped it today, that's what I tell people that are looking at starting the podcast and they're so nervous about it. I'm like, if I stopped it right now, it's been a major success. I mean, personally, and I've provided tons of content to others that are looking to get started in this business. And so my goal was obviously to network and meet the biggest players in the business, educate myself better, by obviously I get to ask any of the questions I want, right, from the experts that are on the show. And so, it's just highly educational for myself. But then in turn, I get to provide value to the guest by blasting them out to my network and all over social media, in their company, and letting them showcase themselves on the show. But then also, to the listener, I get to provide value. And so I get to connect with lots of people and provide value and to help them in their business, and whether it's from podcasting or investing, in real estate.
I like the fact that you pointed out you're getting to ask these professionals in the industry any question you want, because, you know, we all understand masterminds and how, you know, you pay to join these groups and you ask these questions, but if you, by providing someone with a platform, you're able to ask that. So you're providing and you're getting content from that. So that's a great way to put that. Hunter, tell us a little bit about your goal and your strategy and how that's accomplishing your goal.
Yes, it's always fascinating to me. I think that even as entrepreneurs, we assume that everyone is like us, even though there's pretty much no one else like us that we know. It's just, for some reason, it just always is the case. And similarly, I always feel like when I go to in-person networking events, that it's not the best use of my time. And I mean, this is something I spent a lot of my time doing. I went to 3 to 5 networking events every week for almost 2 years when I was getting started in the business. And I just never felt like I connected as well as I could through the phone. And so for me, my platform is a great way to create that networking environment. And I also I do much better learning auditorily rather than through it, like in person, for example. All my podcasts, all my books that I listen to, it's all audio. And so that's not the case for everyone. So for me, that's really how I kind of took advantage of my strengths. In terms of the real results there, like I said, the business has been helped significantly from a marketing strategy. Also, I'm really helping drive the ship in terms of the investment thesis of the company. And that's really built around a lot of conversations that I've had. So I had some conversations recently with an IMF consultant or, some of the leading real estate market timing predictors in the United States. That's obviously going to have a role in the way that I view the sector. But in terms of, some of the most major accomplishments, to be honest with you, probably the most influential thing that I've heard about the podcast is someone called me and said that they passed on a deal because of something that I said. And that is like, man, because I know the deal that they're talking about and it's not good. And the way that it was structured was a way that would be very aggressive. They're very concerned with the upfront fees and just not the type of business that I would want to do. So for me, that's something that's always stuck with me. If I could help people avoid making those catastrophic mistakes, that is 10 times more valuable than helping them make that 10 or 12% return on an annual basis.
Excellent. That was very good. Jason, tell us a little bit about your goals and what your goal was in creating your platform and your strategy behind it. I think you there, Jason?
Yeah. So when we first started, yeah, I'm here. You hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Brennan? So
yep.
A lot of good notes here. Whitney and Hunter both focused on just really the content approach and just getting out there and finding their niche. And for us, it was an evolving niche, right? So we started out that we're going to help people just learn the steps and missteps that others are using to create a business or just turn this from a hobby or even get started. And for us, it was so important to have that. And a point that they touched on is that you now get entryway into all these people who are doing it on just a super successful level. And to be able to go in there and ask the questions that will help your audience, but it also allows you to ask questions that maybe are very important for yourself and help your business along the way. So when you're starting, it's more of a give back, but you get so much without knowing it from these podcasts, but just being able to have access to these people. And the same thing with the meetup. We have people that come to our meetup that have not done a real estate deal to have a couple thousand units, and you don't know who's now sitting in the group, and be able to go in there and have this conversation with people and just get like-minded people together. It really just allows everybody to flourish throughout the room.
Okay, excellent. Well, what I want to do now is kind of go through and tell us what your favorite authority platform is besides your own. And it's okay. Like kind of what I'm trying to get at is, who was your inspiration? Who did you hear when you were getting started that said, oh, that's awesome. I want to try to model that, or I think that's a great idea. Or you took that and added your own little spin on that. Let's kind of get everybody's take on that. Devin?
Yeah, so there's some multifamily specific podcasts. The big ones: Joe Fairless, Rod Cleefs, Wheelbarrow Profits, Jake and Gino. Michael Blanc's got a lot of great guests. And Old Capital's got a fantastic podcast. So they're a debt broker, right? They find loans and everything. But what I like about Old Capital is they're not selling a program. They want you to use them as a debt broker. So they spill the beans on everything, and I really love it. Mike Becker's a co-host on there. Guy owns, over 5,000 units with his company. And so that's a top one, but all those guys are great. And it's such a tremendous way to take advantage of windshield time or otherwise dead time to soak all this stuff up.
Excellent. Yeah. And that's what I always look at when I'm having to drive, because we all have to drive, right? And, but that's wasted time to me. That's time when my brain is just sitting there idle. I have to make that productive time. So either it's something on Audible or a podcast or something, music doesn't cut it, because that's not engaging my brain. It's mindless. So you don't want to be tuned out. So I definitely feel what you're saying there, Devin. Whitney, what's your favorite podcast, or what's one that inspired you getting started?
I think the obvious thing would be Joe Fairless's. Obviously, he's done a daily show, and just seeing his success in a short amount of time, just pumping out tons of content, interviewing great people on his show, providing great content, is a big thing for me, and just following that. There's so many podcasts, but a couple I really like. Old Capital. I learned a lot from that podcast. Getting started, I learned a lot from Joe's, even Devin's videos, and there were even specific podcasts that Hunter and Jason have done that I've learned a ton from, that came from other Facebook groups or whatnot that somebody else posted. And I'm like, oh, I really want to hear that person. I really want to hear, what the questions that they asked this person, or what did they do? And I've learned a lot from many of them, but initially it was Joe's and Old Capital.
Excellent. And Hunter, give us your favorite platform, or one that inspired you.
Yeah, sure. So, we've mentioned some of the heavy hitters. I'll kind of take a different approach. To be honest with you, I think the Joe Rogan Experience is a really significant and influential podcast in the world right now. I think that the fact that it's extremely long form, it's 3 hours, really influential guests of a variety of different calibers, that's really kind of an inspiration to my real estate show. I like to have people of different perspectives, but more importantly, I like to cover those perspectives in a lot of detail because I'm just obsessed with learning myself. So, Joe Rogan is one that, other than all the podcast episodes that have been mentioned earlier, the Tom Wood Show is a libertarian friendly podcast that I've been lucky enough to be a guest on. And he's a major inspiration because he's extremely intelligent, but always obsessed with learning new concept and interviewing people that are experts in their field. So, and that's what I always aspire to be, is just someone who is constantly learning, because I'm truly blessed to be able to have conversations with some of the people that I've had conversations with, including many of the members of this panel.
That's great. That's a lot of content. 3 hours. I think you said you like those bigger blocks of time though too. So I can definitely see how that's influenced you. Jason, tell us about who's influenced you and what are some of your favorite authority platforms.
Sure. Not to recap too quickly, but you definitely have to say Joe Fairless. He's been instrumental in a lot of us just getting into the podcast space. So I'm going to take a little different transition here into mindset. I think a lot of what we do and just the difference from people that are doing it and are not doing it is really they've just made their mind up that they can do it and make it happen. So for us, really two things I'm listening to now. Of course, Brian Buffini talks a lot about, of course, business and just his mindset and just being able to make it through tough circumstances. And then Ed Milet, Max Out podcast. Again, a lot of great guests who are really just talking about focusing on mindset and just setting your goals in mind and being very specific with your outcome. And that's been very important to me and to what I feel is my success throughout.
All right. So I'm going to go over some kind of specific questions from our audience a little bit. There were several in the question and answer, but they've started to, we've answered a lot of those. One question that was just there, actually just went away, is how are you prepping your guests before they come on? I know, Devin, you're doing video, so you're not really on the podcast scene. So let's touch really quick on your videos, before I turn this question over to Hunter, Whitney, and Jason. I like your videos because of what you said, in that it doesn't take a lot of prep time. It's nice little nuggets, kind of like we did, nuggets from the day yesterday. I like stuff like that. It's just like bullet point, a real quick takeaway. I can come, I can go, because I'm busy too, right? So if I can just It's kind of like when I'm scrolling down through somebody's Facebook and somebody has a post. If I have to click more and then I see there's like 3 paragraphs, I'm like, I'm done with that, So I do appreciate that. Was that any in your mind at all when you were creating those little snippets?
Yeah, I just want one topic per video that maybe is, let's say, go back to my avatar, right? You've got a 55-year-old dentist, first time investing. What's cap rate? I'm sorry, I don't know what a cap rate is. Well, let me explain it to you in 3 minutes, what it is. And I'm not going to give you, you got to see a patient or whatever. It's not going to be an hour long, but now you know what that concept means. And then, tomorrow we'll have another kind of simple concept. And so that's the idea I think that's the kind of way I learn is small little chunks of information that I can digest and kind of move on. And so that's how I want to put it out there. My goal is just to create this educated investor, so that they know what I'm talking about when I put a deal in front of them. And that's just the easiest way that I found to do that, is one small concept at a time.
Yeah, and there's definitely 2 ways to look at it. I mean, because there's times when I like the short content, because I'm busy or I've got somewhere to be. But then there's times when, like, I have a long drive, like I've got to go look at this property over here, and I've got 3 hours. And now I'm more focused on, like, a whole book. Like, we have a property in Greenville, South Carolina. It takes me about an hour and a half. So I'm trying to get a book in on the way down and a book in on the way back. That sort of thing. So there's times when I want that long content. So I definitely appreciate both aspects of it and definitely see the benefit of both designs in that. So one of the questions was, for everybody that has a podcast, how are you prepping the guests ahead of time? Do you send them like a guide ahead of time? Are you doing a follow-up after the interview, or is it boom, boom, boom? You're just getting off the phone with them. You don't even say goodbye. I mean, you got a lot of, if you're doing a daily podcast, Whitney, you've got to burn through those interviews pretty quick. So there's not a lot of, how's your day? How's the wife and kids? That burns time, and, you're not going to get in your 8 in a day type thing. So let's kind of go down through your process, how you prep the guests and how you end the podcast. So let's start with you, Whitney.
Sure. So it's a great topic. However, I will say that the time, I've spent so much time and money, getting that time with that guest, right? And so honestly, that time is great networking. When else do I get that, those few minutes with these experts? And so I don't hit the end button right away, honestly. That's the time for me to find out how I can add more value to this guest, or we can do something going forward. It's such an important time, even though I'll do 8, 10, sometimes 12 shows in a day. I'll leave my calendar open from 5 a.m. to 8 or 10 at night if I have to get them done, because I still want that time with that guest, to figure out how I can provide more value and what they need. So, the guests get a list of potential questions, but it's more so just to make them feel comfortable being on the show. Like, these are things we could talk about. It doesn't go, by those questions. And, the other panelists know, I try to ask. Here's a tip, before every show now, I try to ask the guest, what is your expertise? Like in the business, where do you work the most? All these guys are so knowledgeable about the entire syndication business. However, they probably still have one part of the business, or maybe a deal that just happened, or something that, is going to benefit them the most to talk about and really show their expertise to the audience and be able to provide the most content and value to the audience. So I like to ask them, is there a specific, topic that you would like to focus on? And we'll focus on that. But, the guests get that list of questions ahead of time, but it's just to make them feel comfortable. I don't like it to be too structured. I want it to be a conversation. I want to really be able to dig into whatever happened, if it's a property, and, and we may dig into one aspect so we can get deeper. But that's how I do it.
Excellent. Hunter, what's your process?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I actually do prepare, and this is not the norm, I do prepare a pretty significantly detailed list of questions that I want to cover. Part of that is because I want them to be prepared to go that extra 2 and 3 levels deep because of the length of the conversation. And because of the fact that the show is up to an hour long, it usually does touch on some points that they may be not talking about typically. So if some of the guests that I have on the show, they're frequently talking about the same topics, because of the level of depth, I do want to make sure that they're adequately prepared to go there, because I don't want them to feel like I've caught them off guard. But also the the counter side of that is that because they will be very well prepared for the conversation, I'm extremely careful about who I have on the program because it's going to make them look very good. And so I'm cautious about that. That's kind of, I do want to make the conversation go in a way that's organic. So I'm very cautious about the order of those questions. I try to predict the way the conversation will go. But I know that's not the norm, but I think it's just because of the way that my personal workflow is.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And Jason, what's your process? How do you prep for your show?
Sure. So when we are preparing to have a guest on, we'll provide them with a Calendly link, and they can pick a time to come on the podcast at a time that works for them. And then once that time is made, we'll send them out just a prep interview guide that's going to say, here's a list of 20 potential questions that we have on our docket that we may ask throughout. We're going to be taping this on video and audio to be able to give you the best exposure to our audience. And then from there, just that we're going to segment out an hour for the time slot, but the podcast will generally be between 35 and 45 minutes. Generally, when we get on, say it's 1 p.m. tomorrow on the podcast, we'll touch base with just the interviewee and just talk to them a bit to find out what's topics that they may want to focus on and maybe something that they want to avoid. But what's important here is that we want to keep it conversational. I found that from my point, if it's too structured, it limits where the conversation can go. And sometimes you even want to hit record before you're even starting. So, because some of the most gold comes out of the podcast when you're just talking to the guest, I find is some of the best gold nuggets. So for us, it's really important about giving options of where the questions will go. And generally, if we have a list of 20 questions, maybe we'll hit between 9 and 12 of them based on where it's going to go throughout the show, just to give them some guidance of what may be asked. But ideally, let this flow as a conversational point from the start to finish, and just really let the person who's coming on the show dictate the course of the show based on what their experience basically transacts out for the listeners.
And I'll just add to that really quickly, just to chime in. I've been a guest on Jason's show, and those questions that prepare you beforehand, those are great questions. Like they're very like they get to the bottom of who the person is really quickly. And so I just want to commend you for that, because I really like that list of questions. If anyone else has been a guest on them, they know what they're talking about. It's how to get the best content in the shortest amount of time.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Different methods to going about that, to how, you need to have some sort of structure so that you don't have, downtime or, silence, awkward silence, but at the same time, you want it to be organic to some level. So different strategies there. Let's go through and try to tell us one of your favorite guests that you've had on the podcast. And Devin, I'm going to get to you last. I'm going to ask you one of your favorite topics that you've covered in your videos, because it's a little bit different nuance there. So let's go right backwards, and let's go right back to you, Jason. And what was one of your favorite? I won't ask you to say the favorite, because we don't want you to hurt anybody's feelings if they thought they were your favorite. So what was one of your favorite guests?
See, it's hard to say favorite, right? So I've had Devin, I've had Hunter. I'm pushing for Whitney once he gets done with his 17 interviews a day to come on the podcast as well. We've had great guests. I had John Lee Dumas on the podcast, and that was 5 questions. They gave you only 15 minutes for the time, and that was super fun, because it allowed you just to really designate that we had to get the most impact for the listeners out of 15 minutes, when generally our typical podcast is over 45 minutes. Rod Cleve's been on for a ton of information from there. Joe Fairless, of course, Gino Barbaro, and Jake. So it's hard to just say one guest, because I find that sometimes you'll have interview valets who will offer up guests to come on the show, and you'll just be completely blown away by what they're doing. I remember having one guy on from Boston, Tom Caffarella, who, if you don't know Tom, check him out. He does a ton in the flipping and brokerage space, and is creating an investment brokerage. And we're sitting there halfway through the podcast. I never met this guy, had no idea. And halfway through, I look at my wife and go, who the hell is this guy? Just crushing it out there in all different aspects, just doing amazing things, and has really just transcended what he's doing in his core business. And it's just having guests on like that just completely blow you away, because they're able to just look at business from a whole different standpoint and just really take it to that next level. That's the fun in doing podcasts and other different platforms.
Excellent. Hunter, who's been one of your favorite guests on the show?
Yeah, I've been able to interview some pretty cool people in the real estate sector, but I think my favorite interview was probably from Cameron Harold, who actually also is a member of Strategic Coach, which came up earlier. He was the founder, the COO of Got Junk. and just a really great business person and a really great person when it comes to morning routines and also work-life balance. I think that if you can absolutely crush it financially and also be really excited about the vacations you get to take with your family, that's the type of person that I really look up to, and that's the type of person that I want to be. That's the type of father and husband that I want to be. And so those are the conversations that I really like. I mean, one of the reasons that all of us are in real estate is because of that freedom. But once you start to make money, you're like, wow, if I could just do another year like this and another year, like, it starts to get into a little bit of a rat race mentality. But so it's important to have those work-life balance conversations, because the freedom component, the time off and the vacations is really, driving factors why I'm even interested in the sector in the first place.
Excellent. Thank you. Whitney.
I don't know if I can say one guest specifically. I mean, I've had many great guests, and
Who are your top three?
Oh, you can go ahead and say it, Whitney. It's fine. I mean, just tell everybody I was your favorite guest.
Yeah, that's right, Devin. Devin was a great guest. All these guys were great guests. I mean, they really were. I can't say specific names, I don't think, but I don't know. I've had some great guests. I'm not going to say a specific one.
I got you. We won't hold you to anything.
Smart man.
Devin, what was your favorite video? It had to be the solar screens episode. No.
The most comfortable videos for me to make are at the office or a whiteboard because it's private. The most uncomfortable video is at one of my properties because I know somebody's looking at me going, what the hell is this guy doing with this? This appears to be a grown man with a selfie stick and maybe a lapel microphone. And what kind of a weirdo is over there on the side of the building? But so it's super awkward to make for me, but I think they're the best videos for people to watch because it's like, hey, this is not theoretical. We're out here at this property and it was a mess 6 months ago and we spent a bunch of money and we're improving the community. And it just, I think that connects with people that, especially because a lot of my investors are in the same market where I live, like, oh, I know where that property, that's right over here. And it just really connects it all versus some of the theoretical stuff that we all hear. But definitely a little more awkward to record, but the on-site stuff is, I think, the best content.
Well, and we've talked about that ourselves as far as, buying one of those like Osmos, camera holders to kind of do live tours as I tour properties or as I'm working with contractors to really provide that content, right? Like Joe says, we've all talked about Joe Fairless, none of that fluffy stuff, because we've all heard the motivational quotes and all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't really teach me anything, right? I'd like to actually see what you're talking about. You can explain to me different things, but when I actually I'm following behind you in a camera and it's actually not bouncy and, it looks like pretty good content and I can hear you talking to a contractor, I think that really helps people feel important that they're getting that content from you. I think I do like the video concept. I use drone footage and different things like that. Obviously, working with Dan, we're always doing random live videos whenever he feels like it when I'm driving down the road. So you always have to be ready for whatever may come at you. And we're talking authority platforms. I mean, this conference, this summit. This is an authority platform. That's one of the benefits of it. That is the goal of it. We're trying to create content and provide content for our attendees so that everybody can learn. And each one of you have been an integral part in that. I know some of you have been on multiple panels and multiple discussions as we go into the weekend. Excuse me. And we appreciate that so much, and so do our attendees. I do want to leave a little bit of time. We still have a couple more minutes here to go through some questions. And then at the very, very end, I want to ask for one piece of advice you give to somebody who's wanting to start an authority platform, whether it be videos or 3-hour podcasts or daily podcasts or weekly or whatever that is, just a snippet of advice that you can give to our listeners. So looks like one just got answered there. So what would you recommend the team? Let me word this a little bit differently. What kind of team should they create to do a podcast or to create video to provide other content like video and social media? Example, a VA, a local assistant, etc. So Devin, let's start with you. Do you feel a VA in doing those videos, you think that's necessary? Would it make your job easier to have somebody edit your content and send it off to them? Or in your specific platform, do you feel that's a team is necessary?
100%. I mean, I've got a business to run, so, I'm not a full-time content producer. Some people are, that if that's your business model is to go constantly, your investor relations, and that's your sole goal is to get new investors, that's great. But I actually am running the business too. So I've got to be, for my particular situation, extremely lean on the time commitment. So it was important for me to set up a system to basically lay the tracks first. That's a content schedule, topics, and then batch the content and then hand it over to somebody else 100% to execute. Because executing it myself, unless that was, even if it is all you do, it's just lower value task. I mean, you've got to focus on your highest dollar per hour activities, and it's not posting it, especially the way we do it, like posting the raw file to each social media platform takes a long time, but that stuff's pretty easy to train with a couple of video trainings and everything for a VA to handle. And so I recommend somebody that's looking into doing it, you figure out what your schedule is going to be. And you definitely commit to it. Everybody talked about consistency on this panel. So figure out your platform that you're comfortable with, your schedule, and then build all the back-end training. I click this button, this password is this for this platform, do this, here's the description. It's a lot of tedious stuff, but once you set it up, then hand it off to somebody and get out of the way and just stick to banking content like everybody here's talked about, so you're not trying to come up with it every day.
All right, let's jump around a little bit. Jason, let's go to you and get your take on that. What do you feel is necessary, like a virtual assistant, VA, or what kind of equipment, or do you have an editor? Tell us what you think is important.
Sure. So there's starting out, and then once you start, get up and running, right? So don't use that I need a team, so I'm not going to start a podcast, and I don't have a VA, and I don't have, all the best equipment out there. You can literally just get started today just with your iPhone. But that said, how the setup for just interviewers and interviewees that are coming on the show. Then we do have a VA that once we do tape the podcast, it gets uploaded into Google Drive. It's accessible for them to basically pull it out of Google Drive. Michael works in the show notes, puts together the show notes for the VA. We get the headshot prior to it, and that gets sent over. And then the VA goes in there, edits it, and now puts it out based on the allocated day, puts it out in all the different spaces through the podcast hosting site, which of course will launch to iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, etc., to launch it on Facebook, LinkedIn, and other. So really, it's a joint process that's evolved. At first, a lot of the scheduling and stuff was just being handled in-house, and that it was quickly to the point that this is easily trainable. Just hand that off, so we would hand it off, and the same thing with just uploading the podcast. Simple to do it first. We continue to bring in team members that just take everything away from it, and now we have a full team that just gets uploaded, and then it's all out of our hands. We may get asked for content approval at certain points, but that's really the only step in the process that we're still involved after it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And Hunter, what's your recommendation to our attendees as far as what kind of a team you feel is important?
I'd say that, first of all, anyone that's listening to this, you should get an assistant. Anyone that is listening to this should get an assistant, because there is an assistant out there that is going to be able to do tasks that are not worth your time. It doesn't matter how low you are on the income schedule. There's someone that is going to be below that income level that is more than willing to do all the tasks that you don't want to do. And there's something really freeing about writing down all the tasks you do on a daily basis. If you get out there and write down, the 50 tasks or 100 tasks that you do, like if you envision someone filming you all day doing every single task, and then looking and ranking those tasks in order of where you're an expert in, or you have a unique ability, which is a term that Dan Sullivan uses, or if you're completely incompetent in. And those tasks that you are incompetent in should be outsourced. And there's someone that is out there in the world to be more than happy to take those off your plate, even if it's things like restaurant reservations or doing laundry or doing building IKEA furniture, all that stuff. If you don't if you're not bringing joy to your life by doing that stuff, you shouldn't be doing that stuff. And so that's the same thing when it goes with anything about building a team. You should just constantly be working your way so that all day you're spending your time doing things that you're an expert in that bring joy to your life. So that's the exact same with this particular thing. So we have a team that writes the emails. We have a team that edits the audio files, et cetera. But here's a really important point. Sorry, I'll long-winded as usual, but this is a really critical point. I have a background in music production and have created a lot of music and understand how to use Ableton in a really high degree. I may even know how to use Ableton better than the people that edit my podcast, but that is not the best use of my time. So even if they're 80% as good as me, my time is 4 times more valuable doing something else like creating interesting, intriguing questions. So long-winded as usual, but that's my answer.
No, and I can appreciate that answer. It's kind of like it's a means to an end, not the end. Like you didn't, stop what you're doing to go into production. You stop what you're doing to get into, real estate investing.
Yes.
And so these platforms are a means to that end. They are not the goal. And so if you can utilize a team to do that, and it's a hard thing, I think, as humans for us to do, because we feel if we, if we have to give something up, that means we're not the best at it. But you have to be smart. You have to know what do you want to be, and focus your time on that, and find professionals to help you reach that goal that can do those things, those other things to help you get there. Whitney, what would you recommend as far as a team?
As far as a team is a must, obviously doing, 30 or 35 shows a month, I couldn't do it without a team. And, I would say initially it depends on the amount of content you're going to create, and it depends on your skill set. Are you able to do the editing and that type of thing? In which case, that's not my skill set. And also, it's not the best use of my time. I agree with Hunter completely that you need an assistant as soon as possible. And it's that point that you start seeing tasks that you're doing that somebody else can do, and then you can spend your time somewhere else. But I have a master Excel sheet that has all the guest names, but I lay out what every team member's job is and what their duty is. And so my main assistant can help me track all that and make sure, we are on schedule, or that we're ahead of schedule the way we need to be, and that everybody else on the team is doing what they're supposed to do. But everybody on the team has a specialty. It's not one person doing everything, so everybody has a specialty. And so honestly, if one of them quit or doesn't work out, it's not as hard to replace them, to do that task either. But they're an expert in that one thing. All of them are much better at it than I am. And so I want them to do it. A team is crucial. But, I would say too, initially, if you're doing a show a week and you can do the editing, get started. Don't feel like you have to have all of this built up, because it takes time, and it's something you'll grow into. So get started.
All right. Well, we got a couple minutes left, and one other question here was that are all of your team members employees of your LLC and on payroll? Really quick, give me like a 10-second answer on that, starting with—
I'll speak with everyone. The answer is no.
Yeah. I didn't want to answer for everyone, but thank you. Yeah, so these are assistants, subcontractors, if you will. That'd be the best way to describe it.
Yes, they're all virtual assistants. I've used tons of virtual assistants for many tasks.
It's not to say that we might not have a staff assistant that may help us in some of those things, because we all know what it is to have assistants that work for us, like more of our administrative stuff, like locally, and they may help us in stuff. But as far as the authority platform is concerned, editing and stuff like that, that's stuff that can be outsourced to a VA, virtual assistant. So as we wrap up, give me a final word of advice to someone who wants to get started in an authority platform. What is one nugget of advice that you can give them? Let's start with Jason.
Sure. What is one topic that you like and that you're very adamant about, that you want to find out how others have been successful and how you can help others out there? And if you can just start with that one topic, it can allow you to really just get out there and start talking about it. And you don't have to have the best mic or the best camera, although getting that stuff will, of course, help your reach and just help listeners really just want to follow you. But at first, if it's just getting out there and filming content, whether it's on your phone or just getting out there and just setting up an interview with your friends, just as you're just trying to make yourself more proficient at this, it's all about getting started with a topic that you like. And Whitney said it earlier, is that your first podcasts are not going to be great. We call ours the dark days. You look back at them and you say, well, that probably wasn't great, but we got started. And if I was so worried about perfecting just what my questions would be or how I would have my podcast format, then we just would have never gotten started. So again, find a topic you love. Find something that you're adamant about that you can talk about with others just until the cows come home, and something that is going to help you now help others out there.
Okay, so definitely pick a topic that you're passionate about. That'll make it easy to talk about, right? So it's not awkward, and just start. So Whitney, what would you say is one piece of advice that you could give?
When I first got started, I was hesitant to launch, right? I was hesitant that I didn't think my setup was right. The sound wasn't going to be perfect. I was really trying to make it the best that I could possibly make it. I was consulting with a mentor about it, and he wrote back like one sentence, and he said, I interviewed Robert Kiyosaki sitting in my Toyota Camry. So it was just like, done is better than perfect. Get started, and it'll get better as you go. But you got to get started, because it's not going to be great initially. You just got to do it.
All right, excellent. Hunter.
Really combination of focus and speed of execution. So if you can find something that you really want to focus on, that you can spend those 3 hours of blocks of time on, and then get started on that as soon as possible, a lot of weaknesses can be overcome by speed of execution.
Okay. And Devin.
I would say pick a schedule and be willing to commit to it for 2 years with no results. And if you're willing to commit to the schedule for 2 years with no results, then go ahead and implement it. If you're not, think twice about doing it, because a content platform needs continuity. And all these guys that are successful here on this panel stick to a schedule and they have continuity. So, build that schedule and bank content, and then, just execute on it.
Excellent. Well, great words of advice. We thank all of you for being here. I know everybody's gotten a lot of content out of this authority platform, so we appreciate your expertise in the matter, and thanks for joining us. And don't forget, everybody, you can check out the MFIN forum if you have any more questions. But if that's all for now, everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks again, guys, and appreciate the listeners who stuck around. Really appreciate it. It's an honor to be on.